without fail, we are about to talk about brand voice. This is a tricky one, and that's why I'm not teaching it. Because it's very, very tricky. I think I'm okay at mimicking, but I'm really interested. We're going to hear today about brand voice, how to get there. And what's most interesting to me is the reverse engineering part. Are you ready to take it away? Tell people what's up?
Always, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's Tutorial Tuesday. So I am going to share with you my process to reverse engineer voice so that you can file copy that sounds just like your clients. Now, it's a bit of a meaty topic, so I'm going to try and get through as much as I can in the time. So I'm going to go fast. Okay. So before we sort of dive in, I want to ask a question. So drop your answer in the chat box. Who has heard this dreaded feedback? This copy doesn't sound like me.
+1 if you've heard that. Yep. Me. Oh yes, +1. We're getting some +1s coming in. Yep. A bunch just to panelists. Oh yeah.
Okay. There's
basically
so
everybody is a yes.
Yeah. And it's frustrating, right? Because when you file that copy to your clients, they're not seeing how many hours that you've spent researching their audience. They're not seeing all of the brilliant strategy ideas and the great conversion copywriting techniques that you've included. They're not seeing any of that because they're stuck at the first hurdle. All they can think is, this copy sounds nothing like me. But when they tell you that, because they don't know what their voice actually sounds like, they can't really tell you how to fix it and make it sound like them. So basically, you feel frustrated, they feel frustrated, and it leads to this. Okay, joking aside, so this is a serious topic, so I'm going to keep joking to a minimum. That's just who I am. So my mission at the end of this training is to make sure that you never hear that feedback ever again. So there's no more +1s, there's no more, this copy doesn't sound like you. And if you do hear that feedback, you're going to have an action plan. So you know how you can tweak the copy to change the voice, or you're able to defend it by using the tools I'll share later on. You can defend what you've written versus what their voice actually is. Okay, so let's do a quick breakdown of what voice is and what voice isn't. So voice is your brand personality. It's how your brand or your client's brand or business communicates with their audience. And that is everywhere from emails, website, launch copy, it's everywhere basically. Whatever they're talking to the client, that is brand voice, and that's where you should be using it. So voice is actually how you talk. Now, it gets often confused with tone and messaging. Messaging is what you're saying, voice is how you're saying it. And then tone, again, voice and tone are often used interchangeably, but voice is actually, that stays consistent throughout all of your branding. Whereas tone will often change depending on the context who you're talking to, what you're talking about. And I'll share more about that later on. Now, in terms of what makes up voice, you're looking at a few core things, and that's tone, sentence length, language, and then style as well. And those four actually came from the brilliant Abby Woodcock and Justin Blackman. They're incredible, and they taught me that. So I'm going to break those down a bit further on, but that is basically what we're talking about when we're talking about voice. Okay, let's just go back one. So before I dig into who the heck I am, basically, I want to ask you a question. So on my intake form, I ask all of my prospective clients, what is the problem with your copy? And there are 3 answers. Well, I've given you 3 answers here that they could possibly give. So which one do you think they tell me the most? A, the copywriter couldn't capture my voice. B, the copywriter didn't understand my audience. Oh, I think I can see the chat moving. C, the copy didn't have any personal touches. Which one?
Oh, A's all around.
Yeah.
A few B's and C's, I think, for people who have seen too many A's. Like maybe it's B or C.
I like that. Rebels, I like it. They're going to go different. I love that. So yeah, the answer is A. good working out there. I mean, they do say all three of those things, but obviously today we're going to talk about voice, and voice is actually the number one objection that I see and problem that business owners have when working with copywriters. Because even though, yes, you may be brilliant and use all of the great conversion copywriting techniques, if that copy doesn't hit the nail on the head and sound like the client, is going to leave both of you feeling a little deflated. So who the heck am I? So my name's Nicola. I'm a journalist turned launch copywriter. And when I was a journalist, I worked at a press agency and we wrote for dozens of publications. Now, because all the publications basically had the same audience, they wrote the same stories, but despite that, they actually had different voices and they had different styles. Now, when I started at the agency, I wasn't given like a book and saying, okay, Nicola, this is how this magazine writes, and this is how this newspaper writes. No, we had to figure it out ourselves. So this is where my accidentally created process came in to actually copy the voice and style of the publications and basically make sure that I filed copy in their style. And the reason for doing that was to keep the editors happy, because it made their lives easier and they'd want to work with us again. But before I started my own process, my, I guess, like voice mimicking ways started when I was actually in high school. I don't know if my mum knows this, to be honest, but I used to forge my mum's signature and write notes in her handwriting to get out of PA, which is physical education. So I think you guys call it gym class. Oh. So I would forge notes from her and then sign it in her signature. But it was nothing criminal, you know, it's very tame. And it worked. You know, my teacher believed that these notes were from my mum and let me out of PA. So, but the reason, like basically, if this writing, me and my mum have very similar handwritings, very big, loopy, disjointed. Now, if the writing had been off, or I'd used different language that my mum might not have used, you know, maybe I'd used teenage slang, for example, the teachers would have noticed that something was up and probably made me go to PA. Now, they didn't. So that is like sort of how nuanced voice is. Sometimes you'll just pick up that something is not right, but you won't be able to say what it actually is. Anyway, that is how I started doing it when I was in high school. So because I've got this process for sounding like my clients, I can basically sound like anybody, although I can't do accents. So don't ask me to do accents because I'm the worst and really rubbish. Okay, so now I'm going to show you some examples of copy that I've actually written for my clients, and I'm going to show you some samples and sort of dig in slightly into how these voices are different and sort of the different styles that we used. First client, Puerto Rican mom who grew up in Brooklyn. Now I've got some samples of the copy here that I wrote for her. Now, as you can see, she has a super fun voice. There is lots of slang, lots of swearing, lots of emojis, lots of puns as well. I'm not going to read this out because, again, I can't do accents and I just sound like an idiot. So, but if you read this out either aloud or in your head, you will get a sense of what her voice actually is. Now, her sentences are fairly short. I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but she's used italics to really emphasize a word, a swear word, but really like emphasize it so you get the humor that's being put across. Not only that, but we've got a capitalization, again, to emphasize words. So again, this brand voice is super, super fun and really, really sassy. And one of the ways that we did that was by keeping the sentences quite short. When the sentences are short, you're going to keep the pace up. It makes the voice faster and can make the voice a bit sassier as well. So next client is a Canadian middle-aged male doctor. Now, this doctor was actually helping men with low sex drive. So I really had to sort of take that persona on, not literally, but, you know. So with this voice, he's a doctor, so he wants to have a much more serious tone. So if you look at the language, the words and the grade level is much higher. There's lots of long words here. The sentences is really long. We've got lots of action packed words. Now, in terms of from a conversion copywriting perspective, looking back at this, I definitely could have optimized it. But from a voice perspective, this is really interesting in how you can change the voice based on the language, and the sentence length. So again, lots of action-packed words, and the sentences are really long, and we've kept the tone quite serious. The last client here is an introverted, yoga-loving entrepreneur. Now, she was really in touch with her audience. She got quite vulnerable with them. Again, the sentences that she used are also quite long, but the words are actually fairly long as well, but they're much softer than the doctor. She's using lots of references in there, like matcha and barley and things that her audience would relate to. So this client and the last client, their voices are, in terms of the parameters with the tools I'll show you later on, they're fairly similar, but because of the difference in tones, that's what creates the different voices. So why should you as a copywriter care about voice? Firstly, you can wow your clients. So the fact that my business is basically referral based, I think it's probably like 90% referral based, is the fact that I can take on any client's voice, copy them, make their lives much easier. They don't have to edit me, they don't have to train me. So it just makes life much easier. And it also means as well that, and Joe, don't at me, but I don't have to specialize in a niche or anything like that. I can sort of write for whoever I want. Don't say it.
I think that's good. No,
okay.
Side note, I think that's great.
Awesome. So yeah, I don't need to niche down because I can literally write for anybody. I mean, there are certain industries that I don't particularly enjoy writing for, so I won't take that work on. But on the whole, I don't need to niche down. Secondly, I can charge much higher fees than, say, other copywriters, because this voice process that I'm going to show you is baked into my back end. My clients, like, I don't really need to walk my clients through it, but once they see the copy that I'm giving them, they can see sort of the value of the work that I'm doing and the magic that I'm doing as well. And then finally, the same process that I use to sort of mimic my client's voice, you can use it to write and sell brand voice guides. And again, they can be an add-on to a project, or you can do them as a standalone. Okay. I know we're going through this quite quickly, but just bear with me. So before we go into the process, and I want you to write in the chat if you've ever felt like this before. Have you ever said to yourself, I am bad at voice, or something like that?
Someone raised their hand. A couple people raised their hands at that. Some are chatting just to us. Yes.
Yeah. So,
and others are saying no. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Well, the thing that I get really like asked the most is people saying to me, you know, I really think I'm bad at voice. I don't know how to do it. And I want to reframe that for you and tell you that you are not bad at voice. You've just never been given the right tools to copy your clients. So without further ado, we're going to go into how to reverse engineer voice. So step one, and this process is 4 steps, fairly simple. But we're just going to dive in. So step one, get 3 to 5 pieces of copy that's been written by your client. Now, I've underlined written by your client because if, say, somebody else has written it or a copywriter's written it, it's probably not going to be in their voice, or something will be off. So make sure your client's written it. It could be a podcast, or it could be something they've recorded, but as long as they're sort of speaking freely. And just bear in mind, often written copy is much more edited than when people speak, that you can't really edit vocals. So but yeah, I mean, the more pieces of copy the better, but start with at least 3 to 5. And then you want to measure it, and I'm going to share the tools with you on the next slide so you can take a screenshot of those. So the 3 tools are Analyze My Writing, the Hemingway app, and then the Tone Analyzer. So Analyze My Writing, what you're going to do, you need, I'd say, like a basis copy amount is probably about 100 sentences to really get like an accurate data amount. You're going to put that into Analyze My Writing, and it's going to tell you how long the sentences are. That's one of the key features of voice. Like I showed you before with the different clients, how we can change the voice based on how long and punchy the sentences are. So Analyze My Writing will tell you the sentence length, and it also tell you the punctuation that's been used. So it might say that you've used 40 commas per 100 sentences, for example. Now, the more commas that are used, the longer generally the sentences, because we've got different sections to them. So that's what Analyze My Writing is for. And by the way, with these tools, what a good practice is to do is to measure your own voice and then measure your clients, and then you know how to tweak your voice to match theirs. So for example, I write my emails in about 8 words a sentence. So I write super short, super punchy. But if I was going to be writing for Jo, for example, she might write her emails in 6 words on average per sentence. So I know I need to cut my sentences down a little bit to match Jo's voice. That's not an analysis, that's just a guesstimate. But that's basically how you would do it in terms of tweaking your voice to match your clients. Then the next app is the Hemingway app. So this is going to tell you the grade level of your copy. Now, often when a client comes to you and says, this copy doesn't sound like me, they're probably going to be talking either about the sentence length sounds off or the grade level sounds off. And this is where you can measure the copy that they've written and measure the copy that you've written and actually show them and sort of defend what you've done and say, okay, this actually matches in terms of the grade level. So Hemingway app tells you the grade level, so you know basically how simple or complicated the language that your client uses. It's also going to tell you the sentence difficulty and whether they write in active or passive voice. And then finally, which is probably the most exciting one, to be honest, and I feel like it's just sad over saying that, but genuinely it is. This is a tone analyzer, and this is going to tell you the tone that is in the copy. Now, tone is really important, but you've got to take it in context. And I'm going to give you a quick example. So yesterday, I actually analyzed an email that Jo sent out yesterday talking about the Tutorial Tuesday catch up from last week about the last day launch emails. And I analyzed it for the tones that she uses in that email. And she used 2 tones, and one of them really shocked me. And I'm going to see if people can have a guess the 2 tones that Jo used. One of them was took me by surprise. Let's see if people can guess.
I think everybody's talking about the tools you're using. I don't know. I'm curious now.
Can you guess?
No, Angela would know better.
I don't have a guess.
No.
This is exciting.
People are guessing. Okay, so maybe there are words here: angry, serious, joy, sarcastic, irreverent. Can't see what I'm guessing. Go ahead.
Joy was one of them.
Okay.
And the second one was fear.
Huh.
And, you know, the tools don't lie. So I put your copy through and I'm thinking, wait a second. I'm like, is Jo okay? You know, she's an authority on conversion copy. Why does she have fear in her email when she's talking about conversion copywriting? So, and that is when you look at the context of the email. And so the tone analyzer actually shows you which sentences use the tone, and it gives you like a gradient. Like, so the darker the color, the more the tone is there. And where you're using that fear tone is basically where you're talking about, you're basically mirroring the audience's like fears back to them, because people have a joy about the last day of cart close because the launch is nearly over, but it's also a fear because they know how important those emails are, and they want to make sure that they do a really good job, and they're scared they're going to mess it up. So you're actually mirroring their fear back to them. So this is where it's really important that you look at the context when you're using tones, and your clients will be using tones in different ways. And I'll explain a little bit more about that in the next step. So once you've run the copy through those 3 tools, then you're going to analyze the copy. And again, those 3 tools, they were taught to me by Abby Woodcock and Jesse Blackman. And then this is sort of like my reverse engineering of the voice. So I go through the copy and I'm analyzing it for the style. And what I mean by that is, you know, how are they using italics, bold? Do they underline? Do they use colors, emojis, swearing? How do they use punctuation? Do they use punctuation? And you're looking at what they do use and what they don't use. So if we take this slide as a small sample of my style, for example, I've used underlined here to emphasize a point. I've used the Oxford comma, very important. I've used color to sort of contrast and make a point about something. And I've also used the numbers instead of the words. So that's sort of things that you want to be looking at, and you want to make a note of those things. And step 4 is create a cheat sheet. So when you're analyzing it, make a note of everything that you find, put it into a Google Doc, and reference this cheat sheet while you are writing copy for your clients. Then you want to look at the language. So again, what phrases are they using? What language do they use? How are they talking about things? Is there anything that you can sort of swipe and put into your cheat sheet, any keywords? One thing that I like to, I guess, look for is a phrase that really like sums up your client. And the only way I can describe it is when you're going to mimic somebody, whether it's an actor or a famous person, whoever you think of, they will have a phrase or something that they would say. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but whenever you think of any famous person, they will have that phrase. So that's what you're looking for with your client. Like, what phrase do they use that you can use as like a buy-in to their voice? Then you're looking at content. So what references do they make? Do they reference pop culture? Do they reference their family, personal details, anything like that? And then again, you're looking for context. So who are they arguing for, against? What are they standing up for? That is super important, because again, that's going to sort of tell you where the tones come in, and that is going to be where the tones change. You know, are they on the same side as their customer? Some people aren't. And then another thing that you can look at as well when doing brand voice is this, not that. So for example, you could say, my voice is confident, not arrogant. My voice is fun, but not brash. Stuff like that. So it's really like highlighting the differences, so that when you are writing the copy, you know that you're going to be sticking to one side and not the other. And again, like when you're writing the copy for your client, think to yourself like, okay, this is my client's voice, but would my client actually say this? Does this fit their voice? And do that. So maybe with like the 7 sweeps that you would do, that Joe teaches, maybe the 8th one would be, would my client actually say this? And make sure that it really fits like the brand voice of what they're saying. And then the final slide. So these are the 3 tools that I use when writing copy for my clients and reverse engineering their voice. Now, these tools are really important to use with my process, because these tools will give you the parameters for the voice and, you know, sentence length, tones, etc. But what they're not going to do is tell you like how to actually sound like your client. So, for example, we could have the same parameters, but we would still write in very different voices, because we haven't actually looked at what the language and the content and the context that the client is using. And then these are the 3 tools. They're free, they're online. So yeah, that is everything. And then my final thing.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, just may as well keep talking now. If my slides work. You know.
Okay.
I don't think it's going to work. So
it will happen. I know that it did happen, so hopefully it will come back, because I saw, and then there you go. Yay. Thanks everybody for attending today as well. Thanks, Ange, as usual. And we'll see you next week. Be sure to follow up with Nicola separately, and everybody have a good rest of your week. Bye, y'all.